Hey guys, Victor here coming at you with another discussion video, and today's focus is going to be how to beat Infernoble because, let's face it, as the format has progressed, this deck has picked up a lot of momentum and is definitely on a lot of people's radars now just because we've been able to see the power firsthand. Like, if this deck goes first, you've pretty much auto lost the game just because it's that oppressive of a deck. It has multiple negates, multiple interruptions, it can hand loop. It pretty much just does everything a tier 1 deck can do. The only issues with it is that if it goes second, it does have a harder time, but even then, this deck can have hands where like there's just enough gas that it can pretty much play through an entire opponent's board and just break it and then set it up to the point where the opponent's not going to be able to come back anyways. So with that out of the way, let's just jump straight into the video. Now, normally at this point in the video, I'd be talking about the generic combos that Infernobles would be going into and the ideal final board. But there's too many pieces in this combo for me to actually effectively show off. So we're just going to focus on like the key aspects instead. And let's start off with Neospace Connector. So because of Neospace Connector, most hand traps are honestly really ineffective against this deck because you're going to be forced to negate the Neospace Connector, otherwise you're going to lose key pieces. Like, if you have an Ash Blossom or an Effect Veiler, you have to do it on Connector. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, because the moment Aqua Dolphin comes down, you're losing that card anyways, and if you're getting close to time, you're going to get burned for 500, and things just can just quickly spiral out of control, especially because in addition to looping a card out of your hand, they get free knowledge of what's in your hand. And I don't need to really like repeat this because it should be common sense at this point, but knowledge of your opponent's hand is honestly just invaluable because it ensures that you're going to be able to make the correct plays and on the correct board. You can pretty much prepare for almost everything except for the top deck, obviously. But yeah, in a game like Yu-Gi-Oh, knowledge is power, and this card gives you a lot of knowledge in a format where it can just straight up auto win you the game. And then we have Isold. What can I say about this card? This card's insane. It should have been banned years ago. There's no reason for this card to still exist because every time this card is relevant, it just leads to something ignorant being in the format. And Infernoble is no different, just because like I said earlier, the ultimate goal for this deck is basically, even if they don't hand loop you with like Neospace and Aqua Dolphin and stuff like that, this deck still sets up multiple interruptions to the point where you can't even really effectively break their board, especially thanks to cards such as like Angelica, which is brand new support, right? And the Angelica equip spell more specifically, where I don't know if you guys have ever played against like Mermails back in 2014 or whatever, when they had Abyss Scale to Mizuchi, but Angelica, the equip spell basically works the exact same way, where on the resolution of the very first spell card, it'll automatically negate it. So even if you have cards just like Forbidden Droplet and Super Poly, they're still relatively ineffective just because the Angelica will be able to stop them no matter what, even if you discard, or I mean send like a spell for cost, or even with Super Poly's discard cannot be negated card text, right? It'll still stop them. So cards like that are just very ignorant. And then we have Immortal Phoenix Gearfried here. This is just going to be representing their end board because, like I said, they're just going to have multiple negates and backed by like backed by the Angelico equip spell and just countless other interruptions. Like I said, the game is basically over at that point. So with that, let's just talk about some of the cards that can actually help you stop this deck. Now, when it comes to going first against Infernoble, there's a lot of really effective floodgates that can actually just straight up win you the game. Skill Drain, Soul Drain, Macro Cosmos, Summon Limit, all phenomenal cards that just make the matchup super easy for you. But the two that I want to focus on are Dimensional Barrier and There Can Be Only One, mainly because I feel like these ones offer you the best chance at being like the most generic, I guess, that you can use in multiple matchups, right? Instead of just committing your entire extra deck to just one deck, you can use it against multiple decks. And let's just start with Dimensional Barrier. So when it comes to D Barrier against Infernoble, it's honestly not the greatest, but it's not the worst either, just because you completely cut access off to the synchro portion of the deck, and it does heavily rely on synchros to be able to actually play the game. However, you have to be aware that this deck is more than comfortable with just link climbing into like an Appaloosa and then setting up a Gearfried. So you have to deal with 3 monster negates plus like a spell and trap negate, which, you know, it's not the greatest situation in the world, but it's definitely manageable compared to like normal scenarios. And just being able to cut off synchro access for a turn can sometimes just straight up auto win you the game, because you have to remember, in addition to the Dimensional Barrier, you're going to have a bunch of other cards typically to combo off with it, whether you went full combo yourself, and it's basically just there as like a security blanket to help ensure that they can't push entirely through your deck. And then when it comes to There Can Be Only One, every deck or every monster in that deck is a warrior monster, so it's a no-brainer that something like There Can Be Only One can just straight up auto win you the matchup, especially if they're going to go with like the Neospace Connector start, right? If they go normal summon Neospace Connector, activate the effect, you chain There Can Be Only One, they literally cannot do anything and they just auto lost the game. So, you know, very powerful floodgates. that you can be aware of to help you easily win the matchup. And with that, let's move on to board breakers next. Now, when it comes to board breakers, they're all pretty effective at dealing with the Infernoble board, I'm not going to lie to you. However, you have to be aware that thanks to the Angelica equip spell, you're going to have to bait something out. Because if you just go raw, shotgun, forbidden droplet, or super poly, yeah, these cards can't be negated depending on, like, in the case of droplet, what you send. Or in Super Poly's case, you know, it literally says the cards or effects cannot respond to this card's activation. But Angelica works differently. It works a lot like the Abysscale Mizuchi Mermail equip spell, if you guys remember that, or if you played against that in that format, where it negates the card on the resolution of the effect. So it's just like that special type of wording will ensure that these cards get stopped every single time. So you're gonna have to like bait something out pretty much first to make sure that the Angelica doesn't apply anymore, because it only stops the very first spell card that would resolve. So after that, you're pretty much free to do whatever you want. And then just go to town. Like Forbidden Droplet, it's pretty much outside of the Angelica, it's a full monster board. So if you drop with them, they can't do anything. Same for Dark Ruler No More, even though it's not really as effective, just because you typically want to, you know, defeat your Infernoble opponent on that turn, because it is very possible for them to like just build back their resources. And then when it comes to Super Poly, everything in that deck is basically Fire Warrior. So if you play the Garura, you can just dismantle boards incredibly easily. But yeah, like I said, when playing with board breakers, you basically just have to bait the Angelica first, and then if you bait the Angelica successfully, you're pretty much free to go full combo whenever you want. And now, let's move on to the hand traps. Now, hand trapping Infernoble is a little bit awkward, honestly, just thanks to the inclusion of cards like Neospace Connector being able to pretty much effectively cause you to lose out on what would otherwise be known as like staples, such as like Effect Veiler, Ghost Martyr, Ash Blossom, you know, all really good, really impactful cards that are seeing play in the metagame just get completely invalidated by Neospace Connector, because it forces your opponent either to use it or lose it immediately. And by that, I mean either you use it or you lose 500 life points in addition to the hand trap. So it gets a little bit tricky, and especially in the case of like Droll and Lockbird, for example, right? Even though Droll and Lockbird is phenomenal in this matchup, if they start the Neospace Connector, you can basically just kiss this card goodbye. And it really sucks, because this is pretty much like one of the few key outs that you can play to effectively shut the deck down. But if the Neospace Connector resolves, you're going to lose it before you can even use it. So, you know, you just feel bad. But you still have to play Droll and Lockbird just to be able to hopefully be able to stop them from playing and making their gigantic boards. Because if you do get Droll and Lockbird off, at most your opponent is typically only going to make like an Appaloosa, maybe the Gearfried, but it's very rare. They pretty much have to commit everything just to the Appaloosa. And then let's talk about Infinite Impermanence. So Infinite Impermanence is a hand trap that doesn't care about Neospace Connector, just because it's not a monster, so there's no way for them to get rid of it from your hand. And as a result, you can use this against key cards such as like Isold, right? Where sometimes if you're just able to negate the Isold summon, you can win the game right then and there, just because they really need that additional summon to just be able to play. Now, it's not always going to be the case, and sometimes it'd just be better to, you know, like if you do get the Droll and Lockbird off, you should just hold the Infinite Impermanence anyways and save it for the Appaloosa on your turn. But if your hand is pretty weak, trying to stop the Isold when it's trying to summon from the deck, not on the ad, when it's summoning from the deck, can sometimes just make or break the deck. And then for the final card, I want to talk about Artifact Lancia. So this is a really underrated hand trap in this matchup, and I personally really like it just because it stops a lot of the key cards, right? So it stops their Phoenix Blade from adding back to their hand and giving them a lot of additional resources. It stops Gearfried from ever being able to summon itself because it can't banish from the graveyard. And most importantly, it stops Angelica from summoning from the extra deck because it can't banish itself whenever a card is activated. And you know, just like those small, really key interactions can go a long way in just helping you stunt this deck and being able to ensure that you can actually win the game. So if you really like want something, I really would recommend Artifact Lancia. And then even then, it helps you against like those really weird matchups like Fluanderies, right? Where if you Lancia them, they can't activate any pots. All their flus go to the grave. So you get the added bonus of that in addition to being able to stop decks like Infernoble. So yeah, with that, that's the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time. See ya!